Hey guys, it's Quana back again with another Her Real review. Hope you guys are doing awesome. Alright, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about How to Train Your Dragon, the 2025 live action adaptation to the 2010 animated classic. And I do call it a classic now for a reason. And I'm going to be telling you guys my thoughts about it, having seen it at an early IMAX screening, whether or not I think it's worth your time, your money, and the trip to the cinema with your family. So lock in, buckle up as we enter the world of Berk. Alright, so if you recall in 2010, the book How to Train Your Dragon was adapted into an animated feature. And on a trip to Atlantic City, of all places, I got an opportunity to watch it in IMAX with my husband, and we were floored, completely blown away with the animation style, with the way that they were able to capture the flight of the dragons, the immersion into the world, and the story of Hiccup and Toothless and the other Vikings on the Isle of Berk. It was amazing, and it was instantly, I would say, one of my top 10, maybe, top 10 animated films of all time. And of course, that's subjective because I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. So there were so many films that I grew up loving and adoring, especially those from Disney. And this was probably one of the first of DreamWorks' films that I was really in complete awe of, to be honest with you. And it became something of a little bit of a classic in my own household because my little girl is absolutely obsessed with dragons. We got her a How to Train Your Dragon bedroom set. We've watched the movies countless numbers of times and the spin-offs and things of that nature. And so it's just such a fun and engaging world to immerse ourselves with because we are a family who love dragons. And so I was so glad to get the opportunity to go see the screening because it's so hard to sign up for and get the free screenings, and then let alone to get one where you can take your family and where you can get multiple seats. So this was the first time I've ever been able to take my family with me to one of my screenings. Usually I can take one person with me, and we were able to get all 6 of us into the screening. And we were also very surprised because we were going to be seeing it in IMAX, which we were completely not expecting. And so, grateful, but still a little bit nervous about the adaptation because let's face it, the live action adaptations to animated films have not been faring very well. It's also something that I don't think studios should be doing one for one. And I really do wish that Disney, despite trying to line their pockets, would pump the brakes a little bit on some of these films that are getting adapted. Now, I've been a little bit of an apologist for the adaptations because I do think that they can, hear me when I say that, they can bring new life and bring new audiences into some of these worlds and stories. And hopefully, if people are as curious and interested as I tend to be, they will go back and explore what came before. And I've always done that with remakes, I was a fan of the classic Disney Pollyanna with Haley Mills, and I am a fan of the 1989 musical adaptation Polly with Keisha Knight Pulliam and Felicia Rashad, for example. I've always been someone who didn't mind remakes, but I would go back and look for the original, and depending on where it resonates, I might love the original more, or I might like the remake more. And I think there's ways that you can do that, especially if you are paying homage to what came before, but you really are exploring something new and original. It's one of the reasons why the live action Little Mermaid is one of my favorites, not only because I actually adore Halle Bailey and have been a fan of her and her sisters for so long, but because the relationship between Ariel and Eric feels so much more authentic, and in trying to demonstrate what relationships and kind of being interested in investigating that interest into love and showing that depicted on screen for kids is so important to me. And I never feel like the Disney animations really do a good job of it because the romances do happen so quickly. I thought that the little addition in The Little Mermaid of actually showing Eric being interested in exploring and showing how Ariel is also interested in exploring, and them kind of finding that commonality together, like gravitate to people who you have shared common interest in. I thought that was an important message for kids to see depicted on screen. And so I will always appreciate the live action Little Mermaid, even though I also absolutely adore the one that I grew up with, which is the original 1989 animation. I could be wrong about the year, but I know that I was 7 or 8, so bear with me on that one. And so with this one, I was excited because I stayed away from the trailer, but I did see the one teaser where you see the very iconic adaptation, or the very iconic scene where Hiccup is trying to finally be able to touch Toothless and is learning like he can't go to him staring him straight in the eye. He has to kind of approach him as you would a creature, not making eye contact and showing some sense of reverence, and he touches him and it's like this moment of connection. And it's such an iconic moment from the animation, and I was so pleased to see that. Both one, I actually did like the way that they animated Toothless in the live action, and two, Mason Thames definitely channeled Hiccup for me in that moment, in the costuming and everything about his mannerisms. I was like, okay, I'm kind of locked in. Well, when we get to the theater and we're all settled and we've spent too much money on snacks, the movie starts, and I was immediately floored because the initial action sequence into the Isle of Berk, where you get to meet this island that is submersed in dragons and being attacked by dragons, and you meet the Vikings on this island, and you know, you got that narration of Hiccup telling about how they have to keep rebuilding the houses and all the different things. It's so immersive in the animation. It was more so. And I think that's really what, when people are asking for these live actions, it's because animation is so beautiful. But I don't know about anyone else. Maybe when you're a kid, you feel like you're a part of it, but because it is animation and you know you're not animation, like, it feels very much like you're looking at art. It doesn't feel immersive. It doesn't feel like something that you could belong to. I think it's why, even though I'm going to briefly mention She Who Must Not Be Named, I think it's why so many people still love and adore Harry Potter. And I don't just mean book readers, right? Because obviously those of us who were the book readers who then enjoyed the adaptations, we fell in love and immersed ourselves in the books. But when you watch it play out, it feels like Hogwarts could be real. It feels like a real school that you could one day go to. And I think that's the adventure that people are seeking when they go into these live actions. Let me know in the comments if you disagree with that. And so that initial action sequence in the live action is amazing. And hats off to the director, Dean DeBlois, who also directed all of the other, well, most of the other animations in this. And I think that was also so smart of DreamWorks to do, to hire the initial director, because they knew that he loves this franchise. He was the one who started this franchise, and so he was going to take care with it. And I do think that that's important, is like having the director who is going to be adapting it be someone who really feels a strong affinity for what came before and doesn't necessarily want to dismantle that, but wants to either pay strong homage to it or bring something new to it. And in this case, I don't think that something new were any elements in the story in the same way that The Little Mermaid was new elements. Little Mermaid gave us kind of more exploration into the lore outside of the Disney animation, the lore of mermaids themselves, with like the siren's kiss and all of the different things, right? This was the new was us as the audience feeling like we could for once be Vikings in the Isle of Berk. And that initial sequence, I was sad. I was completely sad. It was completely amazing. I immediately looked over at my husband and I said, the 4DX of this is going to be amazing. And we have credits for 4DX when we went to go try to see Sonic, and then it wasn't working, so we couldn't go see it. So we had to credit our account. And I was just like, yeah, no, we might be seeing this one again. And we don't do that too often. I mean, I personally see lots of movies again and again. My husband is not a watch a movie more than once kind of person, with the exception of probably like the Goonies and like not Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee movies. With the exception of that, he doesn't rewatch a lot of movies. But I was like, no, we gotta go see the 4DX of this. That's how amazing those special effects were in that opening sequence. But let's talk about the acting. We have the return of Gerard Butler, who voiced Hiccup's dad, the leader of the Viking clan that we meet on Berk. He returns to portray that character, and I thought he did a great job. He did a great job the first time. He did a great job this time. We have newcomers, well, mildly newcomers, Mason Thames portraying Hiccup, and Nico Parker portraying Astrid. There was some initial fray about Astrid not being fully white and blonde. That did not bother me one iota. And I'm not just saying that as a Black woman. I am literally saying that going back, I had to go back and rewatch the original because it has been a few years, probably like 2 or 3 years since I watched just the first one. I think we've watched lots of the others, and we watched like Book of the Dragons and all those different things. But it's been a while since I watched the first one. I went back and looked at it again. Nico Parker captures what Astrid's essence would be in real life. And I watched it again and I was like, oh, I for some reason remembered Astrid in my mind feeling fiercer, and when I watched the animation, she didn't quite feel as fierce to me. Like I didn't feel like she had a true hunger for it, and Nico captured that amazingly. And so I thought that all of the actors did a really great job. Now, just kind of like in the animation, the gang of kids who are all trying their hand at being, the top honcho, they all do feel very stock character-y and like caricature-y, and cartoonish, but they're supposed to. And so they feel cartoonish in a very human way that I thought, was okay. It didn't feel off to me in any way. The kids did mention that Rough Nut and Tough Nut, it was a little interesting because they're played by characters who are obviously not related and they don't look as much alike. But I had to kind of go into them and tell them about, like fraternal twins and how in real life fraternal twins don't look that much alike. There's not really a fraternal Phil and Lil and Rough Nut and Tough Nut. Like they would look a little bit different. And the way that they kind of play that off as them being like polar opposites of each other, I thought was really cute in this particular film. We have Fish Legs, Julian Dennison. I thought that he captured kind of like the bookish, nerdy charm very, very well. And Snoutlout was aggravating as he should be. So they all do feel very kind of cartoonish and kiddish, but I do like the way that they kind of come together. I will say the live action has about 20 additional minutes, and I do feel like those 20 additional minutes were well used. Most of them were action sequences, more time given to the action sequence at the beginning, more time given to the training montage with Hiccup and Toothless, and more time given to the battle at the end. And so that time was spent pretty evenly. But they do add little nuances to explore the world. They do show a couple of, I think, which are historically accurate pieces, which is this, that Vikings, while by and large are a group of Scandinavian warriors, they're warriors that come from different Scandinavian areas. It's not just one. They weren't like an ethnic group per se. That they would have kind of collected people from different parts that they traveled, because of the nature of most groups that were sailing groups, warrior groups, traveling groups, that everyone did not maintain their mono ethnicities back then if they were travelers. So there's little touches of that I thought were really nicely added into the world to explore this world of Scandinavia. Like, you had a character that was very evidently meant to be an indigenous woman, maybe a New Zealander. I'm not 100% sure of like where she would have specifically, what tribe she specifically would have been from. There's definitely a character who would have been from like Africa, perhaps North Africa. So there's all of those different things that are added into it that I thought worked well, and they weren't major focal points. Like, if anybody tells you that it ruined the experience of the whole movie for them, they're lying. They're lying. It was really short little moments, and then nothing else was said. If the story just plays out exactly as it does in the animation. So I will say there is little moments of time where some of the scenes do drag on maybe a touch more, because animation, you can go faster, you're not doing maybe as much character development, and in live action you are spending more time with the characters because you're trying to get more scenes and more development in the characters. And I would just chalk that up to the fact that it is live action and not necessarily to the fact that it's animation. It didn't deter it for me. Also, it was late. We watched the movie, came on like at 7 something. So I may feel differently if I were to watch this earlier in the day when I haven't had a full day of like work and wrangling children all day. But it was maybe like a couple of small touches where I did feel like the pacing was off more in the middle. But the battle sequence at the end and the action sequence at the beginning, perfect bookends to this. I also did feel like the relationship between Hiccup and Stoic, like that felt like there was more cost to it. It felt like it had more weight to it. The idea of this kid who wants to do something to help his community and make his dad proud, and he wants to be a pure, true Viking and help out in the way that he knows how to, but he keeps messing everything up and he keeps disappointing his dad, and he doesn't want to do that, but he also wants to be true to who he is. That felt I felt so much more weight from that. The final sequence in the end, and I guess I should have said spoilers, but I'm not. The final sequence at the end, without too many spoilers, felt more impassioned to me. Was I a little less emotional than the first time that I saw this? Yes. But I'm gonna chalk that up to me and not to and the fact that it's been literally 15 years of life since then. But it was, as a parent, I felt the weight of the live action more in the end. So we had an absolutely amazing time. Now, while I will say, if I was going back and Letterboxd was a thing and I was doing film criticism in 2010 and I had been rating this movie, when I walked out of the theater in IMAX and I saw it in 2010, I would have given it 5 stars. I'm going to give this 4.5 stars because, again, I do think I have to take away something just from the fact that it is an adaptation of a film that's not that old. And people will say, well, who asked for that? But I will say this, for me, as someone who does enjoy fantasy, and we get live action fantasies very rarely for families, and I personally will not be covering the new adaptation to the work by She Who Must Not Be Named because of things. We get so little of that for kids and for families, and I just think that there is something to this being a live action film that kids will be able to see themselves in, and that they will be able to like feel more immersed in the experience. I will liken it to this: the experience that grown-up fans had watching Game of Thrones and being sucked into Westeros and like watching it every week and feeling like Westeros was something that was tangible almost. I think people will have that same feeling with Burke in this in a way that they haven't before. So those are very much my long-winded thoughts on How to Train Your Dragon. It is the, in my opinion, best live action adaptation of an animated film that I have seen, hands down. CGI is good, special effects is good, the acting was on par with what it needed to be for this film. It makes me hope that we get a return to the early 80s when we had a lot of fantasy live actions coming out. Maybe this will inspire people to say, well, we don't need to keep adapting franchises that already exist. Instead, what we can do is we can explore the world a little bit more. And I will say this, I will liken this to a family-friendly version of when Lord of the Rings was adapted, because there was an animated version of Lord of the Rings. It still exists. There was an animated version of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It still exists. I remember growing up watching those. But there's something about those live actions that feels more immersive for families and for kids, and that's what this does for me. But let me know your thoughts. Are you excited to see How to Train Your Dragon? Are you planning to take your family to go see it? It comes out this weekend. I'm sure it will make a gazillion bucks because there's not a lot of family movies out right now. And let me know your thoughts in the comments. And I will see you guys in the next video. Toodles.